Hi guys, another episode on Based in Reality. Think Smart is our key slogan that we use here, and that's what our channel is about. Current events. We want Americans to think smart. We want Americans to kind of wake up and smell the coffee. Not just us, the little guys, but we want our companies, our governments, our military. We want everybody to think smart and just act accordingly. So today, quick video. This is massive, and I'm going to do another video on even bigger news. But these headlines in the last today's headlines have just been insane, guys. Who is this about? This is about our government, Europe, governments within Europe and the Middle East. They have all been hacked by China using Microsoft. Okay, so Microsoft has made a program called SharePoint, and it manages different kinds of documents for companies. But all kinds of companies use it. Departments, governments use it. Okay, now those that were hit were the ones that didn't use cloud-based servers, but used their own internal proprietary servers. So that's where the flaws are able to be leveraged. Okay, and apparently they were just discovered. We just now discovered these big, huge holes in the software. Now, I'm just going to tell you guys, I'm not a big fan of Microsoft. I don't use Office. I don't use like all the different kinds of software that Microsoft is into. They are a monopoly, and I don't believe in monopolies, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Amazon. I think all those gigantic, enormous companies should be broken out. When you get so huge and you have so much money, more money than the budgets of nations, there is such a temptation there for nefarious things to happen. And so this article I found on Bloomberg just a little bit ago, and the story broke less than a day ago. According to a source in the article, this hack happened on July 7th. It says attackers have been exploiting the flaws in SharePoint in these various companies and governments since at least July 7th. Okay, so that is 2 to 3 weeks they've been pulling information, pulling data. This is according to Adam Myers, Senior VP at CrowdStrike Holdings. So CrowdStrike is a company that does cybersecurity. I definitely am a fan of CrowdStrike. You might want to think about investing in CrowdStrike. It's a good company. Also, Google has a company that does cybersecurity, and they are called Mandiant Consulting. So these are the two that, found all the leaks and holes and got the information out. So we do have a named source on this article from Bloomberg, and his name is Eugenio Benincasa, and he is a researcher who identifies and analyzes Chinese government-paid spy firms. So we're going to talk a little bit about these firms, and then we'll wrap up. There are 5 of them. This is how organized. Get ready to freak out, guys. This is how organized China is in terms of their attacks. Again, let me just, before I tell you about these firms from China, let me tell you who specifically at this point has been identified. They are let me find it. Where did you go? Okay, they are the hackers have breached the systems in a US-based healthcare provider. It doesn't list it. Targeted a public university in Southeast Asia. They have also attempted to breach SharePoint servers in countries. And these are the countries: Brazil, Canada, Indonesia, Spain, South Africa, Switzerland, the UK, and the US. What the hackers do is they get in using stolen login credentials. They get the usernames, they get the passwords, the hash codes and tokens, and then they go in and they mine the data. Okay, according to the Chief Technology Officer and Head of Threat Intelligence at a company called Unit 42, which is a a department, I guess, at Palo Alto Networks. He says this is a high severity, huge urgency threat. What makes this especially concerning is SharePoint's deep integration with Microsoft's platform using their other services like Office, like Teams, OneDrive, and Outlook. Okay, which has all the information valuable to an attacker. Many thousands of businesses and institutions worldwide use SharePoint to store and collaborate on documents, right? They share the documents, they work collaboratively. Microsoft says that the attackers are specifically targeting clients running SharePoint servers from their own proprietary private networks as opposed to data that is stored on cloud servers. Another cyber firm called iSecurity said the flaws allow the hackers to access SharePoint servers and steal keys that let them impersonate users or services even after the server has been patched. It says hackers can maintain access through the back doors or modified components that survive any update and any reboot of a system. Okay, so I'm just going to stop there. I wanted to tell you which groups in the U.S. have been hacked. Okay, the Education Department, Federal Education Department, which has been restructured, but their files. The Florida's Department of Revenue, okay, so Florida's money, and Rhode Island's General Assembly. Okay, so the government, state government of Rhode Island. But there's a lot more. The two groups that have been tied to this SharePoint break, they're called Violet Typhoon and Linen Typhoon. I'm going to give you a super fast breakdown of these 5 Chinese paid spy firms. First, Violet Typhoon, an espionage unit long focused on lives of prominent government officials and military personnel. For purposes of what? Blackmail? Linen Typhoon, and these are the two that hit Europe and the Middle East and the U.S. It's Violet Typhoon and Linen Typhoon. Linen is a shadowy group that spent more than a decade, over 10 years now, stealing intellectual property. So this would be, studying the software, the code, to replicate, to mess with, to break into. Then we have Volt Typhoon, notorious for targeting the U.S. energy power grid and our water systems. That's not scary. Potentially to disrupt services during a conflict. Hold that thought, everybody. Salt Typhoon is behind a global hacking spree, like what we've got here, on telecommunication firms, including 9 so far in the U.S., and finally, Silk Typhoon. Silk Typhoon is a suspected Chinese intelligence outfit, all of these are, that collects intelligence on COVID-19 vaccine research. I mean, where do our thoughts go on that one? So let's think about this. My other video was on how the Chinese are smuggling in messed up seeds that can ruin our wheat and corn crops. How they've also been smuggling in chemicals that can be damaging to our water supply, our river systems, which feed our crops. And we also, of course, use the water for our homes and our drinking supply. So let's go through it. So the Chinese are looking at messing up our farmland, messing up our water supply, ruining the grid during a conflict, potentially to disrupt the services during a conflict. They're also behind taking down our telecommunication networks, as well as targeting the key people that are running our military, the people that are running our government. So they know who these people are. They find out who the key people are to take them out. So why would a company go after every single aspect of the U.S. that is required to sustain us? Our food, our water, our electricity, how we communicate, the telecoms networks. Why would a why would a country do that? Because they're our enemy. Because they are most likely planning something. And so each one of these legs is think of it like a Lego. So let's say that a bomb goes off at a power plant, okay? Then another lever or domino piece could be knocked down. Pull that lever. The lever with, any of these. Can you imagine if all these things that these typhoon units, they want to create a typhoon. They want to create destruction. And if all of these levers were pulled because the data has been being stolen through Microsoft's software, thanks Microsoft, um, our whole country would be in a typhoon. Our whole country would be in a tailspin. So how do we think smart? Dump SharePoint. Because this article says that the hackers know how to avoid getting tossed out by a reboot, avoid getting tossed out by, a patch. It literally said that in the article. So SharePoint, bye. There has got to be something else that can be used. Maybe it's slower. Maybe you have to use a few different programs to do what SharePoint did. I don't know. But we need to look at the products that China has infiltrated our companies with and our governments with. We need to remove China from our systems, including SharePoint, including other softwares. Okay, we don't need to be using a Microsoft product that we know that Microsoft has had many ties to China. And let's look at who is the founder. I know he stepped back from Microsoft years ago, and people want to say, oh, well, he's a philanthropic person. No. Bill Gates has done so much damage. If you look into his background with India and this vaccine experiments that he did on the Indian people, India wants nothing to do with Bill Gates, let me tell you. Research this for yourself. He was a frequenter of the Jeffrey Epstein Island of good times. So I do not use Microsoft products. We can get along without using a company who's had those kinds of ties, who has that kind of reputation. So think smart, everybody. Think. And anybody who's watching that's in the government, please let us decouple consciously from China. Look at all the areas that they are preparing to destroy, to send a typhoon. And they didn't just hit us. I don't know if I read to you guys all the countries: Brazil, Canada, Indonesia, Spain, South Africa, Switzerland, UK, and US. All those countries have had hackers attempt to breach their SharePoint servers. Okay? How do they do it? They steal the login credentials, usernames, passwords, hash codes, and tokens. Okay. Okay, and then lastly, how do we know it's China? Because we've got four different, 3 security firms are listed, and an individual who analyzes and identifies Chinese attacks. His name is Eugenio Benincasa, and he works at a Swiss university called ETH Zurich. And he's a specialist, and he says this has every single mark and styling and technique that the Chinese government-backed and paid espionage firms use. So it's pretty obvious. So yeah, guys, think about dumping your Microsoft products. You can get along without them. There's so many even free open source software available that you can download on your system that works just great. LibreOffice is one that I use on my laptop. Works fine. Works great. You might have to forego some features, but nowadays there's so many different workarounds and third-party apps and ways of doing things. I highly suggest that people realize that these massively huge companies like Microsoft, I would not be surprised. I just think it's interesting that these doors that hackers can get into happen to be from Microsoft. I'm just saying. What do you guys think of that? I'm just asking the question. I'm just asking the question. So think smart, guys. We're going to do another episode here on who are America's enemies. Is it to scare people? No. It is to have appropriate actions taken. Appropriate actions taken. Okay? We need to really look at who's coming in. Chinese researchers. The ties between Our government in China in the college space is off the charts. That's a whole nother episode. All the connections that we have to China through our universities. They've got their people living here and attending our universities on very important research work. Does that make sense? That's just, I'm scratching the surface of that episode. But I am going to shortly do another episode, you guys, on something that is bigger than big. To me, it is bigger than former President Barack Obama shipping over to Iran in a plane at midnight. It's bigger than that, right? And we can all guess where that money went. Hello, Hamas, Hezbollah, Caliphate, Al Qaeda, I mean, we know what Iran does with its money. It certainly isn't interested in benefiting its citizens and elevating, their lives. So anywho, watch out for this next episode that will be coming out. Think Letitia James, off the charts. This has nothing to do with her property scam, as they're calling it. This is beyond that. All right, guys, so have a good day. Think smart, be aware, take care, think smart, and act accordingly.